Hello everyone. This is Roshan Martin. I'm here to present for the case study number one. I believe the focus is on the financial analysis regarding the new fixed assets. The company that I wanted to focus on was the one that I'm privileged to work for. Um, and it's called Raytheon Company. So let me go through a couple of things for the team so that you guys can get an idea of what the company does and what markets they perform within. So let me go ahead and kickstart this. So first I wanted to start off with the needs that our current world faces. I really believe we're in a new world, as the bottom mentions. We're in a new world with new threats and dangers. First of all, I'm sure everyone watches the news, so everything that's mentioned here, you've seen in some shape or form within the news stories that are currently out, whether it's terror being spread in different parts of the world, to cyberspace and the different. I'm sure you've heard about the NSA leaks that are pretty much on all the time now on the TV. To emerging nuclear states. You remember about a couple of weeks ago they had North Korea on the news probably every minute of the day talking about the nuclear capable ICBMs that they're able to that they're talking about launching, and it potentially hitting Guam. So those kinds of things are very relevant to us now. We also have conventional military threats. This is something that we've seen across the ages, whether it's small teams of military combatants to, in this day and age, we talk about missiles and air warfare, naval missions. So the idea is there, just the way it was in the days past, but now it's just new technology, new capabilities. So we have to be able to kind of run with the times and also keep up with the technologies that are being brought to bear. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is the core markets that Raytheon functions within. And I'll just go through the main ideas really quickly. So first is known as sensing. The other is effects. The third is shortly named C3I, but it's command, control, communications, and intelligence. And the last is mission support. So sensing is pretty much, I called it here acquisition, analysis, and transmission of situational data, but it's basically for military commanders when they're in theater. What we call theater is just the battle space, your battleground. They want to be able to know the who, what, when, where, why, how of their team, of their group. And so being able to get that information and then assimilate it and also transmit it to the commanders, to the leaders, and also even at the highest levels to Congress and the executive branch. This is something that Raytheon feels is something core to their business. They want to be able to provide the military with this kind of data. The second is effects, threat discrimination and suppression. And I really believe RMS, Raytheon Missile Systems in Tucson, kind of is geared towards this with their missile capabilities. They're able to use electro-optical sensors to detect a threat, whether through its heat signature or its infrared capabilities, and then discriminate whether it is a threat or it isn't, and then be able to take action using the warhead to suppress the threat. The third is C3I, and this is basically the way I picture it in my mind is in today's day and age, you have not only just the ground, forces that are in an area, but you also have naval vessels that are off the coast. You have strike fighters in the air, and also you have command centers that are possibly thousands of miles away, all controlling the battle space and making sure, and commanders are miles and miles and miles away, wanting to know and wanting to direct what goes on in theater. So this is where you have integrated ground mission solutions. So you can bring together all these pieces of the puzzle and create a cohesive kind of data set that everybody can use in order to bring about a certain mission success or mission result. The last is mission support. So here I called it life cycle system support and training. It's basically being able to go and teach the warfighter or the person using the product, the soldier, how to use the product, how to maintain it, how to, and in some respects, how to get rid of it. Because a lot of this stuff is highly sensitive, it's proprietary. For instance, if a helicopter catches on fire or something is damaged, they usually blow it up. You don't leave the stuff behind because a lot of the products and the technology is so crucial and so sensitive that you don't want to leave that stuff in good working condition. You want to damage it before you leave it. So there's a lot of things that are involved with training and support for the products that we give out, and that's the thing that we give the customer, that support for mission success. So the last one here is cybersecurity. It's something that I'm going to talk about as the slides progress, but it's something that's becoming a more crucial stance. It's not the core focus because these four in red are the focus, but the cybersecurity is becoming pretty important, and we'll see that later on in the slides. So moving on to page 4, the company overview. So I'm going to talk about the business units just very, very shortly, or very quickly rather. So the company has 6 global business units, and they're strategically created to talk to the core competencies of the company that we talked in the slide previous to this. So the headquarters is in Waltham, Massachusetts. It's a little outside Boston. And there's an asterisk next to 6 strategic global units because at the bottom you'll see Appendix A1 business units. So there's an appendix at the end of this presentation that talks to all the business units. I'm not going to go into that right now. The only thing I just wanted to mention is that's going to be important later on because I think it affects the bottom line and the financial statements, as we'll see later on, especially the net fixed assets. We have approximately 68,000 employees worldwide. Just as a brief interjection, there was also once a program, I'm not sure if it's still around, but that operated in the South Pole, and there was another program that operated in the Brazilian rainforest in the Amazon. So it's kind of very diverse. We also have like a construction entity within the business as well. So it's very diverse. It's a diverse portfolio of products that we give to the customers. But it's not so diverse that you're like, okay, you're making coffee and missiles. It's not that diverse, but somewhere along those lines. There are about 15,000 contracts. So at any given time, the company is juggling many different customers. 74% of the contracts are actually domestic in nature, and they answer to the DoD, Department of Defense. I apologize. And 26%, this is data that comes out of the 2012 annual report, 26% is international in nature, and that answers to NATO. So one of the things that is actually coming of age is well, previously you'd have to go through government entities in order to do business internationally. So if Raytheon wanted to do business in Saudi Arabia, they'd have to go through the DoD. The DoD talks to the outside nation, and then business is done via those means. Now there's something called FMS, which is foreign military sales, which directly corresponds. So you have your contact in Saudi Arabia, and that's their representative. And so our representative talks to their representative, and the government signs off on it and says, yeah, okay, this looks good, but you don't have to go through the channels, that long red tape that was necessary. So that's something that Raytheon is definitely getting into now. They're hoping to capitalize on the international markets, because they realize that the domestic will have only so much to provide, and there's such a breadth of business that's in the international market that national defense companies have not capitalized on. So this is, I think, industry wide, but Raytheon is especially putting focus on it, and so they're kind of at the forefront of this this venture. So moving on to the next, I just wanted to talk about the three questions that the professor wanted us to talk to. The first being, how does Raytheon spend how much does Raytheon spend in new fixed assets for each of the last 2 years? How much did they spend? The second being, determine what types of projects they're spending on, and the third being, does that expenditure talk to the company's strategic direction, as well as how do you see it being spent? Is it too little, too much, just the right amount? And also, are there disconnects between the numbers and what's released in the press? So we'll talk to those throughout the rest of the slides. So the next is question number 1. So most of my data was pulled from the annual report for 2012. I'm going to attach that to this presentation. So within whatever folder or anything that I put this in, I'll attach that as well as corresponding material. So when looking at the cash flows from investing activities within the consolidated statement of cash flows, you can see there's a portion within the annual report that talks to the additions to plant, property, and equipment. So just reading off the slide, 2012 had 339 million, 2011 was 340, and 2010 was 319. So there's a significant difference between the 2010 and 2011 values, by about 21 mil. I'll talk to where this comes in. I really believe this is a manifestation of the acquisitions that the company kind of was involved in between 2010 and 2012, because it kind of directly, the difference in numbers just correlate with the acquisitions that the company made. So we'll see that later on. So the company projected an estimated value for the 2013 year for the new fixed assets of 360 million, which is kind of a little more than what 2012 saw, almost similar to the difference between 2010 and 2011. So I'm guessing that's because of new ventures in the cybersecurity realm. Cybersecurity is one of those things, just like software, that it continually evolves, and it evolves at almost an exponential rate. What was good in the last 2 years is no longer good. It's adequate. So you have to keep on doing the next thing and keep on progressing. And also, as of December 31st, 2012, this is just a reference, but as of that year, the company utilized about 29 million square feet of floor space, and 93% of that was within the U.S. As I mentioned, the company diversifies itself by doing foreign military sales, and so one of the things that they want to do is get away from the U.S. Not get away, that's a wrong way to put it, but start opening up its markets to the outside world, as well as get into the cyberspace realm, which means you're not worrying about manufacturing space anymore, you're worrying about software. So we might see a stabilization in the amount of fixed assets, but it might not be the same kind of fixed assets that are being utilized now. We're getting more into the technologies and the softwares rather than the space and the equipment. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so the continuation of this, this is something that I pulled from the annual report. It just talks to the different gap requirements. I thought it was relevant because we're kind of learning about it in class, and it's good to see this stuff in the real world. I was pretty excited actually. So let me go through it real quick. The notes stated that the fixed assets are actually stated at cost, less accumulated depreciation. Major improvements are capitalized, minor improvements are expended, or expensed rather. And depreciation is a combination in this particular instance of accelerated and straight line methods based on the useful lives, estimated useful lives of the equipment and fixed assets. So the annual report actually provides what they consider to be an estimate for the fixed assets. Machinery, 3 to 10 years, equipment, 5 to 10 years, and buildings, 20 to 45 years. So it also occurred to me that unlike some other fixed assets, land increases in time. So even though you're depreciating it, you're going to be earning value on the land that you own. So I thought that was pretty interesting to see because they talked about it in the annual report. And I believe some equipment as well, it's over time it gains value rather than depreciating. I might be mistaken on that, but that's something interesting that I saw. And so definitely what they said, and I remember this statement, is the business units are mandated to follow gap requirements, and I'm guessing if you go outside, then they have to follow the IFRS, I guess. So that'll be interesting. I didn't really see the international versus the national regulations mentioned in there, but I'm guessing because they're trying to venture out into the global market, this is definitely something that they want to keep in mind. So the next is something that I pulled from a website. I guess it's WikiInvest. It's two plots. The left being net fixed assets for the last 10 quarters, and the right being net fixed assets for the last 15 years. So the thing that I found that was interesting was, if you look at the left plot for the last 10 quarters, it's actually funny how it kind of works. So the first bar over there is for Q4 of, I believe it's 2010. So the second, third, fourth, and fifth are actually Q1, 2, 3, and 4 for 2011. And I saw the same pattern twice. So it goes somewhat high, decreases for 3 quarters. Decreases for 3 quarters, and the last quarter it spikes up. And the same thing happens for 2011 and 2012. And I'm not sure if this is like a pattern, but I was thinking about it and I thought, well, maybe what happens is you end up spending, because I've seen this in like construction projects that they do around the plant site, and I've kind of talked to people about this. You end up spending, and then you realize, like, if you have a certain amount of money allocated in a bucket towards acquisitions or fixed assets, you spend, and then realize that you have, at the end of the year, a whole bunch of, I guess, allocation available to use. So then you say, okay, let me go and splurge on this, and whatever's residual that you've been, miserly about, that's what you kind of just blow and you get. So one of the things that we saw was, if we have residual amounts of cash left in the construction bucket, they go and pave the already pristine parking lot. It's kind of that idea. So that's something that I saw that was interesting. I'm not sure exactly how it correlates to the business, but it was interesting. And then the second plot to the right is actually really interesting as well, because it shows the last 15 years, the progression of the last 15 years for the company in terms of net fixed assets. So if you look, it starts off at, I believe, 97, and it's pretty high. And then it gets to about 2001, and I think this is a direct correlation to the defense market. If you see from between 2000, like 98 to 2005 or so, 2006, it's pretty high. All the tall bars are between that time, and that's just because we were in war mode. We were in Iraq, we were in Afghanistan. There were wars being fought, and we were spending a lot in order to provide for the warfighter. However, 2007 came, and suddenly those wars are starting to trail, and the country is focusing on economics, on just its heartbeat and financial heartbeat. And so you see the company scaling back immediately, drastically, in fact, down from the 2006 values, and saying, okay, we can't spend as much anymore. And then it starts to just kind of flutter in that zone of like 1.5 billion. You know, so it's one of those things where you can see the last, how many ever years, and it directly correlates to what was happening in the world at that time. And that's my interpretation. It could be something different, but that's what I see in the graph. So let me just talk to real quick the acquisitions that the company was involved in. I'm not gonna go through each of them, but there's a portion of the appendix in A2 acquisitions that talks to each of them and how much was spent. So the company made about 3 acquisitions in 2010, 4 in 2011, and 3 again in 2012. They're kind of similar. The price points are not too different. I believe 2010 was about, let's see. So this is the chart that I made. So it was about 152 million for the 3 companies in 2010, about 645 million in 2011, and about a little over 300 million for 2012. So what you're going to see is a big change in the amount spent between 2010 and 2011, and then a little scale back between 2011 and 2012. So 2012 should be a little less in acquisitions than 2011. And remember, at the beginning I talked about the new fixed assets and how the same thing was occurring, where you see that 2010 was drastically lower than 2011, so it was a significant blip above 2010, and then 2012 was just a little bit under 2011. So that's my theory on what kind of is occurring, because you see the same kind of change. The difference is pretty similar, so to speak. So I'll let you guys look at that graph and kind of digest it. But one of the things also that was pretty interesting to me is probably around 75 to 80% of these companies are directly related to cybersecurity. Only one of them is in missile defense, which is K-Tech Corporation, which was the last one acquired in 2011. So it's clear that the company wants to get into cybersecurity. It's a new branch of military I guess program, and the company definitely wants to invest itself in that market. Sorry, my voice is going out, so drinking a little water. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. I wanted to bring in research and development. Only because if we're talking about new fixed assets, we also have to talk about the equipment, because in this line of work, the equipment is very expensive. You can get something that's a device or something that's maybe 4 by 4, let's say 5 by 5 inches, and it could cost well over $200,000. So it's really important to keep in mind that equipment is very expensive in this line of work. It takes a lot of man hours and a lot of production to build something that's that's got several hundred semiconductors and electrical equipment that's intended to function for a certain purpose, a very certain and specific purpose. The technology is just very expensive. So you can see that 2011 and 2010 maintained $625 million for R&D. However, 2012 was about $700 million. So the annual report talked to why this happened, which kind of gives us an indication of exactly why these numbers look the way they do, or at least the difference thereof. There's an increased bid and proposal expense that occurred between the 2011 and 2012. There was a $79 million increase in 2012, and so bid and proposal expenses turns out that they're about 40 to 50% of the R&D expenses that are incurred by a company, or at least Raytheon. So when you see that type of increase in bids and proposals, you can also see the R&D costs go up, which I believe in turn could potentially see your fixed assets go up as well. It's something that I'm still debating if fixed assets and equipment is directly correlated to bid and proposal expenses, but that's kind of something that I saw that could have indicated that things are a little more, because the next fixed asset for, I believe, 2012 was 339, and 2011 was 340, but this increase in R&D could have contributed to the fact that it was close enough. It could have made up for the 625 in a different place. Now that sounds ridiculous, but who knows? So, okay, the third question was relating to three aspects: company direction, spending, and any disconnects. I believe we're coming close to time, so I'll speed through this a little bit, but there is something that I want to talk about. If you're talking company direction, there's three things that we need to address. Sequestration, which is specific to this industry in defense. You won't find it in the commercial sector. And restructuring of the business units that transpired this year, and as well as cybersecurity, which is something we already touched. Let me just really quickly get into sequestration. So there, in the appendix, there's a A3 sequestration and A4 restructuring. So feel free to check that out at your discretion. So A3 talks about sequestration. Basically what happened is we're in an interesting business environment between 2006 and 7. So before that, things were great. We could spend at will, and things were contracts were fixed price, and everything was good, or everything was cost plus. I'm sorry, everything was cost plus, where the government foots the bill for any additions and spending. But now everything is fixed price, so anything that we spend that's more, it's on us. So we have to bring down production costs and make sure that we're not spending too much. And I really believe that's an effect of the recession. When the government comes in and says, with the Budget Control Act of 2011, they said, okay, we're trying to minimize the growing national debt, so we have to start cutting back. And one of the things we're going to cut back on is the DoD budget. So what the Budget Control Act of 2011 did, it scales back the budget for the DoD by $487 billion over the next 10 years. So essentially what that translates to is about $500 billion is going to be axed from the budget for the next 10 years. So between 2013 and 2021, I apologize, I will go ahead and change that. We're going to see a couple of programs axed, others put into what they call in this industry a bathtub, which is just a flat line for a little while, and then it'll come back, it'll resurge. But that's what we're going to see, and it's not the prettiest picture, but it definitely affects the bottom line. And I think it's going to affect the net fixed assets as well, because if you're not having business come in, you're going to have to scale back on what you buy for that business. So that's something that's kind of important to us. And then the next is restructuring. So as of April 1st, 2013, the company actually is no longer 6 business units, it's 4 business units. What they did is they took 2 business units in different parts of the country and put them together. And then they took another one and broke it apart amongst the residual 4. So what you have is an opportunity to streamline operations, increase productivity, and also we believe in, as the company motto says, customer satisfaction is key to the way we do business. So the motto for the company is customer success is our mission. And that's pretty much one of the things that we drive towards, which is what can we do for the customer that will make them more successful. So that was one of the intentions, I believe, for the restructuring. And there's an expected savings of $85 million annually by committing to this change. So the next slide. Let's see. Talks to spending. I believe the company is spending the right amount. One of the reasons I believe this is because when you look at the balance sheet, the company actually, so it went from about, in 2010 it had about 3.8 billion in cash, and then in 2011 it had 4 billion in cash, and they spent a little bit in the last year, but in 2012 they had about 3.1 billion, which to me seems like it's adequate given the acquisitions that they've been making and the amounts that they've been spending to acquire new businesses and new opportunities. I think they're pretty cash ready. They're pretty liquid. So in my mind, they're spending the right amount. Maybe even perhaps just a little less to be secure, because given what I said about sequestration, they don't want to spend too quickly because they don't know what's coming up at the other end or on the turn. So the next is the disconnects. This is something that I think is important to the defense industry. On the surface, I believe the accounting will be fine, and this is not like an Apple or a Google where most of the stuff, excluding the research and development and the patentable items, can be spoken to in the press. A lot of the stuff that Raytheon does cannot be talked about. So accounting wise, yes, there will be a lot of everything should sync up, but there's certain things that for instance classified and black programs that you can't talk about. So what they might say is miscellaneous expenses or something like that they tuck this stuff into because they can't talk about it. So my expectation is that on the surface most of the accounting should line up, but there will be things in there that I'm sure when somebody digs in and does the number crunching, they might find something that certain gaps or discrepancies that can't be accounted for, and I believe they're because of the classified and black programs. I know for a fact that with this whole NSA leak thing, that Booz Allen actually came out and said, yeah, there's sometimes when during our annual, like our financial statements, when we get investors, we tell them that we can't talk to some of the accounting that we do because it's classified. So it's kind of interesting that you'd need classified badges for accounting, but that's a true statement in some of this industry. So that's some of the things that I believe that it should carry over pretty well, with the exception of this caveat. And I believe that should be it. So feel free to take a look at the appendices. There's the business units there, the acquisitions, a little about the sequestration, and some of the restructuring that's taken place, and the link to where that information was ascertained from. So yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment on the presentation, and thank you for your time, and I hope you guys have a wonderful 4th of July coming up, and take care. Bye.